maybe in American history, and the most effective mayor for sure. It can happen to you.
How does it feel to be on the other side of the justice system? How does it feel to be on the other side of the justice system?
Sorry, don't interrupt me. I'm making a statement. If they can do this to me, they can do this to you. Well, I'm going to Georgia, and I'm feeling very, very good about it because I feel like I'm defending the rights of all Americans, as I did so many times as a United States attorney. People like to say I'm different. I'm the same Rudy Giuliani that took down the mafia, that made New York City the safest city in America, reduced crime more than any mayor in the history of any city, anywhere. And I'm fighting for justice. I have been from the first moment. I represented Donald Trump, an innocent man who has now been proven innocent several times. I don't know how many times he has to be proven innocent, and they have to be proven to be liars, actually enemies of our republic, who are destroying rights, sacred rights. They're destroying my right to counsel, my right to be a lawyer. They're destroying his right to counsel. It's not accidental that they've indicted all his lawyers. Never heard of that before. In America, all the lawyers indicted. Now, whether you dislike or you like Donald Trump, let me give you a warning. They're going to come for you. When the political winds shift, as they always do, let us pray that Republicans are more honest, more trustworthy, and more American than these people in charge of this government. Because if our government is conducted this way, and the system of justice is politicized and criminalized for politics, your rights are in jeopardy and your children's. Donald Trump told you this. They weren't just coming for him or me. Now they've indicted people in this case. I don't even know who they are. These are just regular people making a normal living. They're going to bankrupt. They won't convict them.
Yeah. Well. First and foremost, before we get into it, let's just clarify a couple of things that Rudy just said there. He's the worst mayor in New York history by far. In fact, this America's Mayor thing was such a fraud. We all knew it was a fraud. What happened, we could not, as a New Yorker, none of us couldn't wait till he left office. It was 2021, right? And September 11th, of course. And we couldn't wait for him to leave. He was the worst mayor. He wasn't America's mayor until the planes hit the tower and he went down there. And all of a sudden, he did what he did there in 2001, I should say. I said 2011, 2001. What he did there was what Donald Trump did on a large scale today. Rudy tried to stay in as mayor. He was outgoing mayor, and he tried to stay in. He tried to use the tragedy of 9/11 to stay in office. People couldn't wait to get rid of him. But we're going to talk about Rudy. Is a lot more. He said there, "I'm coming for you." Once again, what kind of criminal enterprise is that? We coming for you. We're going to talk about that. The mugshots. The mugshots. I hope everyone was able to see what Greer put together today for the thumbnail on the program. The mugshots out of Georgia. Amazing, including Rudy Giuliani's. We're going to talk about that. Also, this morning, a black FedEx driver who was fired 1 year ago after being, he was fired 1 year after being shot by two white men. We're going to talk about that as well. And prosecutors now want to drop felony charges against the black truck driver who y'all remember last month was attacked by a canine dog when the other officers were like, don't send the dogs out, don't release the dogs, and the officer did. And now the prosecutors say that the felony charges against the young man, they want dropped. And the Georgia sheriff has pleaded guilty to groping Judge Hackett. And we will talk about that as well. And a group of far right-wing sheriffs are making news as their anti-government program, pro-guns and hate organizations continues to gain steam. Here's the guys this morning. Barrington has awakened. He's joined us. And Austin is with us as well. Good morning, guys.
Good morning, brothers. How are you?
Barrington, I think as a gift, I gotta find a way. Why should I give Barrington a gift? I gotta give him a gift.
Give
And
me
you know
a,
what that gift is, Austin?
you're gonna say like an alarm clock or something.
Absolutely.
I already have an alarm clock.
Obviously, that alarm clock wasn't working again. Me and Austin sitting here, we're like, where's this guy at? What is he doing?
Stacy reserved Brown, better be careful.
I know.
You better be careful because
Hey.
he wake up this morning with Barrington on his mind. That's okay.
We've
careful.
already hashed that part out, Barrington, before you came on.
You decide to talk about me this morning. I'm going to talk about you too.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
You may have hashed it out offline, but that's okay.
We live. We live.
We're live now. And you know me.
Listen, that's old news now.
Old news.
Yes, we have to put that behind us.
Oh.
You know, you gotta. It's like one of those things that never happened.
Okay.
I mean, the Austin part happened. It just didn't happen totally the way he would have dreamt it. But
that's the best thing about it, because I can drop my narrative.
Yeah.
You can drop it.
It doesn't have to be true.
Yeah, Barrington is a creative writer.
Yeah, I'm a creative writer. You forgot? They'll be sending you GoFundMe money when I'm done with you.
Ooh, now that's a threat.
He sounds like he's in the Trump criminal enterprises.
Exactly.
Anyway, guys, the mugshots. Former President Donald Trump is going to have his today. He's going to surrender.
We don't know.
Well, again, the sheriff said we've seen all those mugshots. The sheriff said that he's getting mugshot too.
I believe it when I see it.
So what did you believe? Not believe, but what do you heard Giuliani's comments, and you saw his mugshot. I think his mugshot was probably the most classic of all of them. Yeah. But Austin, your thoughts on Giuliani's comments?
Well, Giuliani has also been no good from the time, before he was mayor. The same Rudy Giuliani, see the same kind of, negative, racist, biased political, commentary that he made yesterday. The very same negative statements that he made when he first ran against Dave Dinkins and lost in 1990. Barrett and I were talking yesterday. During that campaign, you may recall. Well, I'm sorry. During the so in 1990, when he lost to Mayor Dinkins, he questioned voting rules. He questioned whether immigrants were illegally voting. He questioned whether folks who were living here, American citizens, but from the Caribbean, whether they should have been allowed to vote. So no one was surprised. That was the playbook of Donald Trump, 20, 30 years later. And then during the campaign of 1994, when he ran against then, one-term Mayor Dave Dinkins, you'll recall that there were a whole lot of, police brutality cases in New York City. Yep. So much so that Mayor Dinkins established some type of a task force or police review board, to look into these incidents. And Rudy Giuliani organized a protest of police officers at City Hall. Police officers, folks sworn to protect all of our lives who were living in New York City at the time. I was there at the time. And these folks on the grounds of City Hall had images of Mayor Dinkins being lynched, being hung, being violated in other ways, and they used the N-word on more than one occasion. Giuliani didn't say anything. He sat on that stage smiling, listening to this, and spoke and never condemned them. So, I'll let you go ahead, Barrington, but I've never thought much of Giuliani.
Yeah, I was talking to Austin yesterday, and if I'm not mistaken, they pulled over between 4 and 5 million New Yorkers in that stop and frisk bullshit that he used to do. The majority, like 90%, were Black and brown men. Most of them were not charged.
True.
Right? They call it the broken windows policy, that you got to start small deal with small crimes to ensure that big crimes don't happen. But like everything else, it's always targeted at people that don't look like that bum that people are talking about, America's mayor. He is. I mean, I listened to him yesterday, and I just thought to myself that somebody should just take something and knock his head off, because all he's done is perpetuate the lies that Trump has been telling. But I know now why he was that way yesterday, because Trump announced yesterday that he's doing $100,000 a plate dinner for Rudy's legal defense fund. So
And Barrington,
Mhm.
and listen to Rudy talk, Barrington. He didn't believe a word he said himself, did he?
No, but he the thing is, he can't go backwards now, because he said that he's going to plead not guilty, and then he jumped into the DA and said that how lousy she is and da 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 da. But this is delicious irony, because the same RICO statutes that he used to destroy people's lives has come back to bite him in the ass. So it's so he can. I saw him mean mugging in the mugshot, and I was laughing because I was like, "Dude, you're going down, bruh. He's going down." So,
Attorney Robert Tarver is with us. Attorney Tarver,
Good morning.
good
Morning.
morning.
How are you?
We were talking obviously about the mugshots and Rudy Giuliani and his legacy, and Barrington just made a tremendous point, a great point of irony that Giuliani, once the king of the RICO statute, is now the RICO statute is being used to against him. Your thoughts on all of that and where it all might end up? They're all getting mugshots and fingerprinted, etc., at the jail of all places. And
Yep.
today, Trump is expected to go through the same thing. Now, he won't be there as long as they were, because he's already negotiated his bond agreement.
Well, here's what's really interesting. I was reading an article where a number of the mob lawyers in
yeah,
and around New York City have been consulting with their former clients. And they were getting such a big kick out of this. The fact that this guy who had trumpeted law and order for so long and had used that RICO statute to put so many of them away was now facing those same charges. I mean, you couldn't write this script if you were doing it for Hollywood. It's the ultimate irony, the idea that he has fallen so far. Now, look, let me just say this. As a person who has always been in the New York metropolitan area, I can tell you Rudy Giuliani was a decent prosecutor. He was never America's mayor, so to speak, because before 9/11, he was on his way out. His ratings were in the tubes, and he just happened to do very well in terms of how he handled 9/11, or I should say 9/11 realistically handled itself. He really didn't have too many alternatives except to show up and be there. And that's what he did, and he rode the wave, and he was fortunate for that. But look, these RICO charges are signature for crime organizations. Generally, we think of crime organizations as being, for example, the mob or gangs or things like that. But in corporate America, these types of crimes are prosecuted regularly by way of RICO. And so there's no difference between what you see happening with Rudy Giuliani and his prosecution and the ones you see in the white collar prosecutions as well. Only difference here realistically is the amount of evidence that they have and the fact that it all comes from a political perspective, from his Republican cohorts.
Now, Attorney Tarver, they want to move this. Mark Meadows and of course Donald Trump and John Eastman want to move this to federal court. There's some hearings that are going next week. What are the chances this gets moved to federal court?
You know, interestingly enough, there are very good chances that it may get moved to federal court. And not because I think substantively it should. I think because substantively, people are subject to bias. People are subject to prejudice, and it doesn't stop at the state or federal courts. You'll have judges who will listen to this and perhaps are Trump sympathizers, are Giuliani sympathizers, and will say, yeah, these things should be moved. It should be moved to some place that is favorable. But on a legal perspective, none of the charges that are proffered against any of these individuals touch on their federal office. In other words, they don't have to do with the exercise of their federal or constitutional duties. So realistically, I don't see a real reason why they should be removed. Just because you happen to be a federal officer committing a crime. Look, if you're a federal officer and you cut somebody's throat, hey, they're not going to remove that to federal court. If you're a federal officer and you happen to run someone down on a DUI, that's not going to federal court. The same principle should apply here.
Stacey, if I may, Stacey, attorney. So if the case is moved to federal court, will Fonnie Willis's role change?
No,
No.
she'll still prosecute it.
She would still be the prosecutor.
Okay.
The state law would still apply. The only difference would be that it would then pull from not a Fulton County jury pool, but it would pull from 10 particular counties which make up that particular district in Georgia.
But the thing,
and that would be the potential, even though that still would weigh against Donald Trump in some respect. It certainly would not weigh as heavily as it would if it were strictly a Fulton County jury.
Yeah. But the thing that we've seen, gentlemen, is that the cross section of grand juries that have brought charges against Trump, they're just regular folks. And from my understanding, Republicans and Democrats and everybody else. So, I don't know why these guys think that they, just because they want it moved, that the people are going to change in terms of how they look at their criminal behavior.
You know what I think they look at is the fact that it only takes one juror. It only takes one juror to just ruin the whole thing. And there is such a thing, as I'm sure everyone here knows, is jury nullification.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to say to a juror, hey, you must be bound by that law. Yeah. Jurors can look at something and say, no, I'm not doing it, in terms of that. They can nullify and say that we just have a honest and reasonable belief that this should not happen.
And Attorney Tarver, we have talked a lot with you and, of course, Barrington and Austin about whether or not this will all end up in prison for Donald Trump. But another question, though, is aside from Donald Trump, do you see this ending in prison for the others, the co-conspirators, Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, and the others?
There's a significant possibility that can happen. And that's always a big issue when you're dealing with RICO charges. And the reason is that the RICO statute itself carries such a heavy penalty in and of itself. It almost forces a number of people who are not on the high end of the spectrum to try to cooperate. And once you get people who start to cooperate, then the dominoes start to fall. People get, we've talked about this a lot of times on this program, about how the people in the conspiracy get paranoid. Because they don't know who is talking to who. You can't talk to anyone else. And so that paranoia sometimes overrides criminal defendants. And I've seen this in people that I've represented, where they come into the equation strong. I'm not talking to anybody. And all of a sudden, they're isolated. They don't know what's going on. And they start to think about it and say, it's time for me to get to the courthouse and talk to the prosecutor.
Start talking.
And one other thing, we've seen all of the 18 folks indicted alongside Donald Trump. There's also an additional 30 unindicted co-conspirators. None of them, certainly not the 18, but of the 30 that have been identified, none of them is Lindsey Graham. Is that a surprise?
It wasn't a surprise to me. I never felt that Lindsey Graham's role was strong enough. He made inquiries, but he didn't seem to make the same demands that Donald Trump made. And I think as a prosecutor, what you don't want to do is overreach.
Yeah.
All it takes is one person who you've overreached on to spoil the entire case. Because if a jury sits there and they see that a person that you've brought in really doesn't belong there, really shouldn't be a part of this whole thing, it can cause them to have issue with the validity of your entire case. And so I think it was probably a smart move not to include him, simply because, and look, we only know what we know, right? From the outside looking in. And so from what I could see from the outside looking in, I never thought that his role was strong enough that it might land him in an indictment.
And during 9/11, that period, I thought that Mayor Giuliani handled things well. It always bothered me, however, that the mainstream media labeled him America's mayor.
Yes.
When they would not have done so had Dave Dinkins been mayor.
But you know what, Austin, again, and Attorney Tarver said the same thing. Well, actually, Attorney Tarver said it right. He said 9/11 handled Giuliani. He did not handle 9. He just, as Attorney Tarver said, and as I tried to state, he simply showed up. And he was the mayor. It's like something happens in DC today, Bowser's going to show up.
But that's like
had Dave Dinkins showed up, they would not have labeled him.
Oh, no question. No question. No question.
But that's like giving me props for me being an adequate father.
Right.
Right. Doing my job as a father. That is what he was paid to do.
That's what he was paid to do.
So I don't know, why they, but
And again, Barrington, you remember, Austin, you remember, and I'm sure Attorney Tarver remember, this guy, he gave us a sort of a precursor into what's going on, what happened in 2020. Yeah, he didn't want to leave the office. They tried to even create a situation where he would stay in office despite the fact that another mayor had been elected.
Because remember, 9/11 was the primary day in New York.
Yep.
So if the planes hadn't hit the buildings, that bomb would have been kicked out of office. Because they were so tired of him with his foolishness and his racism and all that stuff anyway.
Yeah, and if you really think back as to how disruptive and unlawful Rudy Giuliani was. I don't know if you remember his washroom attendant scheme with David Dinkins.
I forgot.
He's the one who called David Dinkins the washroom attendant.
Yep.
He had all the police officers and others rioting. They rioted. They rioted.
We talked about that earlier.
The man. And so, we shouldn't be surprised that he acted lawlessly, because that's who Rudy Giuliani is. And so many of these prosecutors, at certain times, they believe that they're above the law. And that's what happened to him. And although he got this political capital unfairly from 9/11, he squandered it. And he squandered it quickly. Two presidential runs, he went nowhere. He just couldn't build it. And that shows you that it was illegitimate.
Well, and we have to also, and I like what Power 96 writes. It's something very simple, but he says, blame Oprah. She introduced Rudy as America's mayor. As journalists, as reporters, we have to be careful on how we label folks, because it may have been Oprah, it may have been but it certainly was the media in general at that point in time, caught up in what was going on, America's mayor. And it gave him, as Attorney Tarver articulated, it gave him all this capital with everybody. That undeserved.
That he proceeded to squander.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I don't know if you remember, when Trump came in office, he was Giuliani was caught up in representing foreign entities without registering as a foreign agent.
Yes.
They said he was making millions of dollars as a consultant, and no one did anything. Attorney Cabo, when you were talking about RICO going after gangs, the biggest goddamn gangs in this country is the U.S. government. So there should be a whole lot more of them who should be hemmed up by RICO as well. Them, police departments. You have all these gangs.
As I heard people say recently, in terms of Rudy Giuliani, it's no fun when the rabbits got the gun. It was all good when he was the prosecutor, and now he's the one that's prosecuted. But I tell you what, look, in this indictment, he is just one of a number of people who are going to be facing the music here. And I'm fascinated. I'm actually fascinated by the breadth of this indictment, because we can really expect, as I said before, we can expect some of the lower tier people, for example, the Trevion Cooties, the other person. We can expect them to really come to grips with their role and say, I got nothing to gain here by sitting on the bottom. Look, Trump is not even paying their legal fees. So, so what does
You
that
would
tell
think
you
he
in
would
terms
be,
of,
right?
what does that tell you in terms of support? In terms of support, and I'm not talking about in terms of financial support. What does that tell you in terms of logistical and legal support? They will hang you out to dry legally.
Yeah.
This person acted on their own, or these people acted on their own. It's a bad situation for them.
And this $100,000 a plate,
$100,000.
$100,000 a plate fundraiser that Trump is allegedly holding for Giuliani. How many of us really think that money's going to go to Giuliani?
Yeah, that's
If I were one of the other co-defendants, I would be wondering, wait, what about me? Why don't you hold $100,000 a plate fundraiser for all of us?
And that goes
to Oliver's point.
Austin,
He doesn't care.
Austin, anybody who is entangled with in the 45 web now, you deserve it. You deserve
I agree
every day, because the dude has been showing us from long before he came into office the type of person that he is. I was stunned when he came into office and they said that there were 2,500 lawsuits against him from small businesses, from other businesses that worked with him on his casinos and his businesses, and he just decided he ain't paying them. Why would
isn't Barrington? Isn't that interesting? So in a sense, he ran to become president to get away from those things, and now he's running to become president to stay out of jail.
Yeah.
I mean, at least that's how you can frame it.
There's delicious irony all around, and let us not forget, Giuliani's he's caught up in several of these other investigations, indictments with Trump. So if he don't get hooked here, he's still Jack Smith's waiting for him.
Yeah, Barrington makes a good point, because just because he was a co-conspirator unindicted in another case does not preclude Jack Smith, stop Jack Smith from indicting him later on. I really think that that's probably what is going to happen.
Yeah.
Depending on what happens in the Georgia case also. For a player like Giuliani at his age and his status, a prosecutor and prosecutions will take that into account. Depending on what he gets in Georgia. If he gets a heavy sentence in Georgia, they may say, "Look, we're not going to bother with the cost of having to prosecute this guy, who may have at best 10 years left."
Yeah, but they should bang him out, because if it was us, they wouldn't be making those considerations.
Well, real quick, Attorney Tarver,
Yes.
unindicted co-conspirators. Why unindicted?
Often, what you'll do, what prosecutors will do, is in assessing a case, they will want to bring co-conspirators into the indictment to discuss their role. However, those co-conspirators may, number one, be cooperating and be in such a role that they don't want to indict them because they have made some sort of deal, or two, not reveal their true motives of what they want to do with those co-conspirators, or three, the role of those co-conspirators is so narrow that it doesn't make sense from a prosecutorial point of view to move forward with those individuals. Most of the time, when you have an unindicted co-conspirator, that co-conspirator has the role of that co-conspirator is extremely well known, and it's really just a question of what they want to do with that particular.
So interesting. You say that, Attorney Tarver, and I don't want to stay on this what I'm about to say, but it makes me think back. We had a segment the other day about Michael Jackson. The young men are suing Michael Jackson's companies allowing him to allegedly sexually abuse them when they were children. During his criminal trial, some of those same companies, or members of that company, employees of the company, were unindicted co-conspirators, and nothing ever came of it. So just a light bulb just went off. Now something is coming of that all these years later. So I guess I see your point, but the other point here too to take away is the fact that 30 unindicted co-conspirators means that potentially there are 30 people who are cooperating with the government.
Yeah, potentially, but that's not the case. But look, it only takes one good cooperating co-conspirator to really just destroy someone. Everyone. The thing about conspiracies is this: everyone does not have to know that a conspiracy is occurring in order to be a conspirator. In other words, I can have a role in moving something forward in the conspiracy as long as I'm furthering the criminal enterprise. So you have a lot of people who have such narrow roles, but they are conspirators. Most of the time, those people are not. They're when you get these larger cases where you have so many co-conspirators, their roles are not always very distinct and strong roles such that you can prosecute them on their own. But every one of them is a cog in the wheel to make the whole thing go around.
Well, put your civil attorney hat on for a couple of these next items we're going to talk about, if you will, Attorney Tarver. But a black Federal Express delivery driver who says 2 white men shot and chased him in Mississippi last year has now been fired from his job. And he and his attorney said that they honestly feel, quote, disrespected. The former driver, DeMontario Gibson, said that shortly after he received an email from Federal Express about his termination, he just simply felt it was related to that incident. Those 2 white guys, they have been charged, but I believe recently, Barrington, that case it was a
mistrial because of misconduct by one of the cops.
so oh gosh, that yeah, mistrial by one. I mean, because of
But it's Mississippi, right?
Mississippi.
So what do you expect?
Look, these things can be complicated when it comes to employment law, because what happens is that for the most part, an employer has to have a distinct reason for terminating you when you've been involved in some sort of discriminatory act. Now, look, generally, most states, and I don't know the law in Mississippi as I sit here right now, to be perfectly honest, but most states allow for an employer to terminate you for any reason or no reason at all, as long as it's not a discriminatory reason or a reason against statute, for example, using sick time or workers' compensation or something like that. I have no doubt that Mississippi is probably the same way here. But it is very suspicious that once this driver brings these issues to light, absent any misconduct on his part, again, we don't know the full story, but absent any misconduct on his part, that is the case that I, as a civil attorney, would love to take.
But he's also, remember, he's also, let me just mention to you that he's also suing the city. He's suing the sheriff's department as well, because not the sheriff's department, the police department, because the officers at quote unquote, according to his lawsuit, poorly investigated their cases. So he has a $10 million lawsuit against not just FedEx, but against the city and police department.
Very difficult to bring those types of cases for officers, police units, prosecutors, for not investigating a case properly. There are police standards. However, every case is different, And at least in many jurisdictions where I practice, where and I do sue police departments regularly as part of my practice, police don't necessarily have an affirmative duty to do anything. I have a case, and I'll just be real quick with this, where a gentleman goes into a bar. The police officer watches him getting beat up, off-duty police officer. There is no affirmative duty in federal law for a police officer to do anything unless he or she involves himself in the situation. Once they involve themselves in the situation, then they have a duty to move forward. Now, there are many states who impose an internal regulation. I'm talking about either state or federal law. There are many states that impose an internal regulation. So, for example, my municipality, my town may say, hey, you've got to do this or do that, but it's not necessarily ensconced in federal or state law. So it's very difficult to get something going in terms of the department, whether or not they investigated properly, unless you can tie that larger misconduct.
So an officer is not bound to act on a dispute like you just described. You walk into a bar, officer sitting there, or a restaurant, and he's sitting there, and some altercation happens. He's not, unless, of course, I mean, I would imagine if there was a weapon involved, right?
In many jurisdictions, and I'm saying that's not necessarily the case across the board, but in many jurisdictions, and I would dare say most jurisdictions, officers are not required to act unless they involve themselves in the situation. So if you're, it's a very strange nuance. But unfortunately, I found that to be the case in a number of different states where I have tried to bring suit against officers for not doing their job.
So attorney, why are we paying them then?
Yeah. And attorney, you're talking about when you're off duty or whether you're on duty as well?
Well, even on duty officers. Look. Let me just. I'm trying to give you a good example. An officer is on duty and comes upon a crime at the scene, a crime or an accident at the scene. He is bound to do what his department has told him to do. All right. He is bound, and if they say when this happens, you're supposed to investigate. Yes, you have a duty to do that. However, in many jurisdictions, that is not ensconced in any federal, any state law or federal law. It is departmental. And so you don't always have that obligation. It's not as clear cut as people think in terms of an officer having a duty to involve his or herself in a situation.
Well,
it's fascinating.
Why be a police officer?
Yeah. Well, look, I think 9 times out of 10 officers will do that.
Sure.
And I think the quotient's even higher. But it's difficult.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating.
It is.
Now, there are a lot of jurisdictions where that's not the case. For example, in Florida, in Texas with the Uvalde matter, you can see that they're prosecuting the gentleman for not going into the school. Was it Uvalde? One of the school shootings.
Uvalde.
For not going into the school, which was one of his duties. So it's not across the board, but it's interesting how the law changes from jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
I often wonder, why in 2023, some of us live in the states where we reside. Now, as the 3 of you all know, I'm originally from Miami, so I'm not particularly proud to say I'm a Floridian under, DeSantis. But, sometimes I smile and wonder, why would you live in Mississippi?
I say it all the time.
In 2023. Why would you live in Alabama? I mean,
but Austin, the truth of the matter is that we have been witnessing reverse migration for the past like 30 years. So I mean, your attachment to the land, your attachment to your family, type of thing. Those are the things driving people to return to those places. I would never live there. I wouldn't even drive through Mississippi.
Not even limited to that. One of the issues is, if most people today decided they wanted to move out of the state that they're in, they'd have to, number one, do something with their employment. Number two, do something with their residence. Number three, have enough capital, enough finance to be able to do something like that. And look, most people are on a treadmill situation. You know, living paycheck to paycheck, just trying to make it. I think a lot of people would love to get out from a number of these things.
I just think to Austin's or Barrington's point or Austin's point, we just don't. I wouldn't choose. I can't imagine choosing to go to those places. Although I did hear of somebody that one of my daughters decided to get a job and move to Mississippi, which I think it was Mississippi or Alabama, one of those two states that don't exist in my mind. So you will never. And as one of you just said, I know that I was in Mississippi one time, and that was by accident. And when I saw that big sign that says "Welcome to Mississippi," my whole being changed. Everything about my whole. I couldn't believe it. I turned around. I had to get out of it. I think we were going from Kentucky, which is another state I wouldn't live in, but Kentucky. And we crossed over looking for a Walmart, and it was like somebody said you have to go here, and it was in Mississippi. And I said, you know what?
I think it can be very frightening in our lifetime. You know, some of the most horrendous racial crimes occurred in those southern states. You know, I was in Opelousas, Mississippi, or Louisiana, Louisiana. Which, as far as I'm concerned, that's another one of those states. Once you get outside of New Orleans or Baton Rouge, I happened upon while I was driving through a Klan parade. And I said, "Here I am." And, you know, this was quite a few years back, but they were open and notorious about hate, and that's why I say to people now, why are we surprised at what's happening in America? Why are we surprised when the only thing that had happened is that a thin scab had grown over the overt racism that existed in America. And now Donald Trump and company have come along to pick that scab off, and we're right back where we started.
Let me just say this before we move on. We do have newspapers there, a couple of great newspapers in Mississippi, the Jackson Advocate, the Mississippi Link. We got the Birmingham Times and Alabama. You know, we totally 1000% support those.
To their work.
But you know, guys, this is one place where the senior national correspondent is just not inclined to visit. So, but I do salute your work. You do fantastic work. So there you go. And keep your civil hat on too here, and Attorney Tarver, because prosecutors in Ohio want a felony charge dropped against an unarmed black truck driver who a police dog attacked. After a brief chase, we remember they stopped Jadarius Rose, an unarmed truck driver, but despite having his hands up and surrendering, and several other officers imploring a canine cop not to release his dog, the officer allowed the animal to attack Rose. And I say keep your civil hat on, because this obviously is lawsuit territory here, right?
I've had these cases before with police dogs. The standard is that police dogs are taught to bite and hold. All right, that's how you train them. And once they go beyond that, if they go beyond bite and hold, you've got a dereliction of the standard. They violated the standard. They've done what they shouldn't do. They're out of control. It is an instrumentality of the police, just like a handgun or anything else. It is force that is used against an individual. And when that force gets out of control and harms someone, as it did here, the municipality, the town, and the officer should be liable for any damage that's caused.
And Austin, what's interesting about this to me is Jadarius Rose. The reason he didn't initially stop his truck, right? First of all, he didn't know why he had to stop, but he saw these officers drawing guns on him, and he called 911 and said he didn't know why they were they had their guns out, and he didn't know why they were coming after him. He was afraid.
Yeah, what criminal does that?
But this it underscores, you know, we have so many cases. Attorney Tarver talked about them. We've talked about them. where people say, why do y'all run? Meaning black people.
Because of instances like this and others, numerous others. That's why.
I do teach a course for a number of institutions on these police and citizen interactions. And look, one thing I always teach people is like you're always better off when there is a number of police officers, sirens, everything else like that. You're better off stopping. You're better off submitting yourself to the authority of the officer at the scene. No good ever comes from anyone who decides that they're going to run from a police officer. Now, that doesn't say that they're legitimate or anything else like that. It's just that the stone cold reality is if you run, you increase your chances of being harmed exponentially and significantly raise the chances that you're going to be killed because you have given the officer some form of probable cause to believe that something is afoot and something is not right. So I try to convince people. You just need to try to submit yourself. You just need to go ahead and stop because whatever is going to happen to you as a result of your running is likely to be much worse than what would happen.
But it seemed like he did the right thing though. He by calling the police. Now I don't remember if the first car was unmarked, but regardless, he knew that they were officers. But what his problem was, they had their guns drawn, and this was about a mud flap on his vehicle was missing or was not right or something. It wasn't anything so agreed, where he was committing a crime.
Well, again, the question is, at what point did they have their guns drawn? Obviously, it was after the stop and after he failed to stop, and that's what I'm getting to.
Right.
You give them the legitimacy to believe that something more serious is happening than just a regular traffic stop. You give them the reason to believe that there's a reason why you don't want to stop that may be criminally involved. So what you've done is you've actually just played right into their hands and allowed for the violence that you say that you are afraid of.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about Tyree Nichols. He didn't have any criminal intent. He was trying to get home to his mother. That's why he was running. So to me, it's almost like case by case basis. You can't slap a broad brush on things like this. Yes, I agree 100%. You just give them the incentive to kill you when you run. Because I've heard, I was a police reporter for 10, 12 years. And they always said, if he makes me run, I'm kicking his ass. So that's a mindset going in.
Mm-hmm.
If you let them do more than throw you against a car and handcuff you. So.
Well, I like I said, Attorney Tarver, at the beginning of this, obviously it has civil suit written all over it, right?
It does. Those, as I said, the law is fairly clear when it comes to police dogs and what their obligation is. Those dogs are meant to bite and hold. That's what they do. That's what they're supposed to do. When they go beyond that, you've got a problem. And clearly here, that's what this dog particularly did. There was no threat.
And it seems the biggest piece of evidence might be the body cams with the other officers yelling, "Don't release the dog."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and look, let me tell you why you'll get a lot of situations like that now. Police officers, by and large, are not unhappy with body cams because the body cams here save these officers from charges of failure to intervene.
Yeah.
If a police officer sees that another police officer is doing something wrong, he has an obligation, a legal obligation under the law, under federal law and under statutes to intervene and stop those officers from doing what's wrong. We saw it in the George Floyd matter most visibly.
Yep.
So these officers here, they're like, hey, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And it shows that they said don't do it. So they're off the hook. I'm sure they're happy about that.
But what happened again? I don't remember. What happened to the officer? What's the status of the officer who did release the dog?
So he was fired.
Okay.
Yeah, he was fired.
And that's it?
Well, that's it for
course.
now. But the police union says the police union is fighting for him though.
To get reinstated.
Absolutely.
Telling you, we have to we have to find a way to dismantle them police unions. They're the biggest obstacle to police reform. I mean, it's stunning, but it shouldn't be. When you think about the nexus of police unions, the Republican Party, and Trump, these people who have sworn to uphold the Constitution and all that stuff, they themselves are a bunch of goddamn criminals, because they have been saying there's groups in Florida, sheriffs organizations, conservative sheriffs organizations, and conservative sheriffs who said that they refuse to uphold the law in immigration, in voting rights, and all that stuff, and they're still walking around. They still have a job. And their power is the police unions.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Attorney Tarver. Sorry.
No, this is an emerging problem. It's not really an emerging problem. It's been a problem for a long time. But they are openly saying that they will not conduct themselves in conformity with the law. They will do what they want to do and what they believe. And they couch this in states' rights.
Yeah.
They believe that the states have more rights, more authority than the federal government. And so we're back to the original argument about states' rights. And anytime you hear states' rights as an argument, just think about this. The states in and of themselves are the ones who decided that we would have second-class citizenship, that we would be slaves. It was the federal government that saved us, federal intervention. And so states' rights is really just a code word for states wanting to inflict the same misery as they did on Black Americans during Reconstruction and during slavery.
We have returned to the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. 1830s, 40s, and 50s. So everybody that used to talk about, man, if I was around in the civil rights, I would do so and so and so. Now's your time.
You are.
Now's your time. Show us what you got.
Timothy Williams says that GOP wants to disband teachers unions, but not police unions. Finally, this morning, again, with the, we're going to stay legally. A Georgia sheriff pleaded guilty Monday to groping TV judge Glenda Hatchett, who recalled being so stunned that she froze when the lawman grabbed and squeezed her breast at a hotel bar last year during a law enforcement conference. Bleckley County Sheriff Christopher Cody pleaded guilty in Cobb County State Court to a misdemeanor charge of sexual battery and was sentenced to a year of probation. He also resigned from the office he had held since 2017. Judge Hackett said that he so violated me that at that moment I felt so powerless. What drives a sheriff? And look, it's not like she was some ordinary person on the street. This is a very well-known individual.
Did he know her though?
That's a good question.
He may not have known her, and we don't know how much he had to drink.
Yeah.
And this sense of entitlement that they think that women's bodies are for them to do whatever they want with. So it's unfortunate, but not a surprise.
It's not, and one of the things it brings to mind is, in many of these sexual assault cases, where people ask, well, why didn't you as a woman do this, or why didn't you as a woman do that? Why didn't you push him away? Why didn't you slap him or anything else like that? The violation that occurs is so sudden, so strong, and so stunning that it makes it, in many cases, impossible for a person to be able to respond in that moment. We all talk about the things that we would do. If this was me, I would do this, or if this was me, I would do that. Well, perhaps you would, but unless you've been there, you don't know how you're going to react.
Yeah,
you never know how you're going to react in those situations, and everyone is different. I'm surprised. I'm surprised at a year for grabbing a woman's breast, a year of probation.
Right.
To me, that is an outright sexual battery.
Yeah.
Which would require at least some measure of jail time.
Entitlement, brother.
And Barrington, and look, here's the problem, right? This deal allows him to to no jail, a year, just 1 year probation, and of course, what he gets to keep his pension and all that stuff.
Yeah. It's a racket.
Wouldn't be surprised if he did know who she was. I mean, I wanted the same thing as Ed Barrington. I mean, how crazy can you be? Was he aware of who she was? But I wouldn't be surprised if he was, and that goes to Barrington or Rob's point of
Yeah.
white privilege.
But the
And
thing
how,
too,
and how much did he drink? That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Even though alcohol is not going to be a defense here, it
Yeah.
can bring things down. But in terms of just something you said, the pension and things like that, unless the action that a person takes touches on their employment, it makes it very difficult many times to keep them from getting their earned pension. So, if this were in the course of his duties, he did this, it would be a no-brainer that he would lose his pension in many cases. But if he's just at a bar, at a function, on his own time, doing what he's doing, it doesn't necessarily touch on his employment as a sheriff's officer. So it'd be difficult to pull his pension.
but one of the things that it illustrates to me over and over is just how much this country hates women. She's a judge, right?
Yeah.
In an esteemed position, and this dude just sees her as a piece of meat. This country hates women, and there's so many things that you see every day that they try to keep women in a particular place, and it's so interesting because running right along with all of this conservative foolishness that's going on, with all of the things that they're doing, trying to control people's lives, the biggest part of who they're trying to control are women. With
So here's the quick little backdrop of what happened here in January 2022. The judge attended a meeting of the Georgia Sheriff's Association. She was the guest of a retired Georgia sheriff who introduced her to several colleagues, and one of the sheriffs she met at the convention's hotel bar was Cody. And Hatcher said that she told Cody she wasn't sure where his home county was located. And what he did was he pointed a finger at her chest and replied, "In the heart of Georgia." And then he repeated those words, grabbing her breast and began squeezing and rubbing it. And she said she just froze and felt shocked.
Well, I mean, look, the soon-to-be Republican nominee for president, to Barron's point, treats women in a disrespectful manner. And look at how
just grab them, right? Just grab them wherever.
Exactly. And look at the references that he repeatedly has made toward the black female judge here in Washington, and also to Fonnie Willis.
Yeah.
And
Not to mention,
and to Alvin Bragg, but who is a male, but so
right.
he has particular animus to black women.
Listen, he has a black woman judge in Florida, and out in Canada, he hasn't said a word about her.
She's not black.
Yeah.
Right, and she's right.
Yeah,
she is a
no, but she loves him. She loves
right.
him.
She's a professed MAGA supporter. So there you have it.
As long as you love him, he loves you.
Stacey, if I may, I have a question for the esteemed judge.
Okay, we got 30 seconds.
Judge?
He's an elevated target to judge. Go ahead.
Exactly. When Donald Trump does his mugshot this evening, is he going to smile or not?
Look, that's beyond my legal expertise. but for the most part, when people are given their mugshot opportunity, they have the opportunity to do whatever they want, as long as they don't do parody. I've seen people smile for a mugshot.
Yeah.
People look very somber. Generally, most mugshots are taken in and around the proximity of a crime, so most people are not happy enough to do that. But he gets the opportunity to be able to pose. So
if you've seen the thumbnail for the show today, what Greer put together, those mugshots, I think one day we got to do a show on the all-time greatest mugshots. How about that? Well, guys, Attorney Tarver, as always, thank you for your expertise. Barrington, Austin, you guys are fantastic. And Power 96 ends the day by saying that Trump will tip the scale today at 280 pounds. So there you go. Thanks for joining us, y'all. We'll see you again tomorrow. We're gonna have some women on tomorrow, so we'll see you then.